guys, today's video is going to be continuing in the theme of suicide prevention for September being Suicide Prevention Month. So today's video is going to be talking about how to talk to your therapist about suicidal ideation. As always with these videos, trigger warning, we are going to be talking about suicide. I will not be mentioning any specific methods or going into detail, just kind of talking about suicide in general, nothing specific. So talking to your therapist about something like feeling suicidal or your suicidal thoughts can be really, really terrifying. I think having the thoughts alone is terrifying, and then telling them to someone else is even scarier. And then there's also this pretty common belief that if you are honest with your therapist about your suicidal thoughts, that you're immediately going to get sent to the hospital. This happens sometimes, but a good therapist will know how to judge whether or not your suicidal thoughts warrant you going to the hospital or not. So that's a little bit of what we're going to talk about in this video, how to make sure that, you're not going to just immediately get sent to the hospital, and ways kind of around that on how to talk to your therapist. So the first thing that I recommend doing if you want to talk to your therapist about suicidal ideation, but you're feeling a little bit nervous about it, is to ask them what their policy is on discussing suicide. So you should be able to just ask your therapist that, and they should be able to tell you what they would do if a client comes to them saying that they're suicidal. So you can ask them this question as a hypothetical. You can say that it's not, it's not something that you're looking to discuss right now, but you're kind of wondering for if this becomes relevant in the future, what you can kind of expect them to do. And a good therapist is going to be able to go through their policy and kind of ease your fears around that a little bit, especially if you are worried that they're just going to send you right to the hospital at any mention of suicide. So what to expect when you talk to your therapist about this kind of stuff. So usually if a client, and I'm going to speak a little bit from my personal experience as well, when I first brought up being suicidal to my therapist, and when I continue to bring up being suicidal to my therapist, we always kind of go through some questions to kind of see if I need to go to the hospital or if this is something we can manage in my regular sessions. So you're going to expect to get some clarifying questions. So basically what a therapist is going to want to do is to try to figure out if your suicidal thoughts are passive or active. Now, whether or not your thoughts are passive or active, all forms of suicidal ideation are severe and need to be taken seriously, but there's different procedures for dealing with each one. So passive suicidal thoughts are the feelings like you want to die, but you yourself aren't going to do anything to cause that to happen. So these could be kind of thoughts like, I want to fall asleep and not wake up, or you're kind of leaving things up to chance where you're not going out of your way to stay completely safe, but you're not actively doing something with the intention to kill yourself. Now, where they switch into active is where you have those thoughts that you want to die, but you also have a plan and intent behind them. Once you get a plan and intent, those suicidal thoughts become active. So passive thoughts can usually be addressed in therapy sessions, as long as there's no immediate threat to your life. You can talk about these and kind of help, learn how to manage those. When it's active, that's when it becomes, a little bit more likely that you might have to go to the hospital. Not all cases of active suicidal ideation will send you to the hospital, but a lot of them will, especially if you have a plan and you have intent to act on the plan, and depending on what level of details you have worked out in your plan. So basically what your therapist is going to do is gauge the immediate level of threat. Are you saying that you want to die, but you don't have any plan to do it right now? Or are you saying that you want to die and you know how you would do it, you know when you would do it, and you have the things that you need in order to do it? So these are both kind of very extreme examples of how suicidal thoughts can present, and then they kind of fall in anywhere in between the two extremes of just wanting to not be alive anymore and actually having a plan with intent and all the details worked out. So it's kind of a spectrum, so it's going to be different depending on each therapist, kind of where they find that line in your thoughts where it becomes, more evident that you need to be hospitalized or where you can deal with them in your sessions. So there's a couple things that therapists will maybe do depending on your level of SI. So if you can agree to not act on your thoughts, then generally you can continue to just go to your normal therapy sessions, talk about it and address it in there as long as you say that you're not going to act on it. And then if you have the thoughts and you're not going to act on them immediately, sometimes therapists will increase the frequency of your therapy sessions or do check-in calls. So with my therapist, when I am feeling more suicidal, it's hard for me because I'm chronically suicidal. So it's hard for me to kind of judge when my thoughts go from passive to active. So when I start to feel more suicidal, typically that's when we'll move to doing more regular check-in calls where it'll just be like, a quick 5-10 minute conversation to just see kind of where I am with my thoughts, if I think I can still stay safe at home or if I think I need to go to the hospital. And then that's pretty much it. And we kind of do that until the level of SI drops back down. Also, increasing the frequency of sessions was something that really helped me. When I shared this in my last video in a lot more detail, but when I first started seeing my therapist, it was the first time I really, really opened up about my suicidal thoughts. And I did end up getting hospitalized pretty early on in seeing my therapist, which was super helpful for me. But the first thing that we did was increase the frequency of my sessions. So that way, instead of having 1 session a week, I had 2 sessions a week in the beginning. I have more sessions per week now, but increasing it was kind of the way to not just immediately send me to the hospital because I could still keep myself safe from day to day, but I needed a little bit of extra support. And the increased frequency of my therapy sessions helped with that extra support. So a lot of the times with talking to your therapist about suicidal ideation, you won't get hospitalized. A lot of the times you can talk about these things and be open about them and deal with them in your sessions. But sometimes it is necessary to be hospitalized, and I just want to say that there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. I've been hospitalized quite a few times now for my suicidal ideations, specifically when they move into a more specific plan intent with the details worked out. That's when I end up going to the hospital. And the first couple times I went, I felt really bad about it. Like I felt like I was failing somehow by needing to go to the hospital and that I should be better than that. I shouldn't have to go to the hospital. But over the couple of years that I've been in and out of the hospital a little bit, I've realized that I'm using the hospital in the way that it's intended to. And if you feel like you can't keep yourself safe and you would be safer going to a hospital for a little while, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And you should be able to do that, and you should be able to get the extra support that you need. And then in conclusion, I just want to talk briefly about why this is so important. Since September is Suicide Prevention Month, I am thinking a lot more about these things and just really wanting to spread some information about how to prevent suicide. And one of the best ways to decrease the likelihood of a suicide attempt is to talk about suicide. So when people are left with their thoughts and feeling like they have to keep these to themselves, that's when the suicidal ideations get worse, and then that increases the likelihood that someone is going to attempt suicide. So talking about it and addressing it helps to decrease that likelihood and makes it so people can get the help and support that they need. And also talking about suicidal thoughts while they're still passive can help prevent them from turning active. So if you actually start to talk about them sooner, you can prevent them from getting into the active stage where you would require hospitalization or where an attempt might happen. And that is a great thing. And the last reason why this is important is just it's life-saving. For me, when I first started opening up about suicide, I've been suicidal for like pretty much my whole life, and it took me until I was 25 to really admit it and really say it and really get the help that I needed, because I just felt like this shame around it that I couldn't talk about it. And That is what is so dangerous. When you're left with those thoughts and you feel like you can't open up about them and you feel like you have to deal with them yourself, that is when it just gets so dangerous and gets to the point where people are going to try to kill themselves. For me, I made the most of my attempts were made in that time that I was just not talking about um, my suicidal thoughts. And now that I am talking about them, it doesn't make them go away completely, but I know that I have support, and it makes it a lot less likely for me to try to do something to end my life, because now I'm like, oh, I can go to the hospital before it gets that bad, or I can tell my therapist that it's getting bad and he can help me through it. So talking about suicide is what saves lives. Yeah. So that's it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, please feel free to leave any questions in the comments, and I will do my best to answer them. If there are other topics related to suicide prevention that you want to hear me talk about this month, please also leave those in the comments, and I will try to make some videos about them. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.